So, ladies and gentlemen, I think I'm sensing a little bit of a split. It seems like there might be trouble in paradise, and I think to some extent the DA is aware of this. If you remember, a few weeks ago now, I think it was last week, week before last week, I told you that the ANC is doing something very interesting. The ANC is floating ideas about including even more parties in the GNU. And I said at the time that the only reason the ANC would be doing this, because quite frankly, the GNU doesn't require any other parties. The GNU mainly consists of the ANC and the DA, with the other parties purely being there so that the ANC can say, we're not in a coalition, we're in a government of national unity, because it is actually just a coalition. But what it does also serve for the ANC is the ability to dilute the impact that the DA could have on the potential government of national unity. Because the ANC can now turn around and say, look, we can't give you the portfolio positions that you actually require, even though you bring in almost half. Think about this. The ANC has 40% of the vote. The DA has 20% of the vote. That's 50%. The DA could very easily say that they want a quarter or even a third of all government positions. And by rights, the ANC should give them that because they are the second largest party in the GNU. But by having all of these other smaller parties as part of the GNU, the ANC is able to tell the DA, well, actually, we can't give you a third because we also have to give all of these other parties positions, and therefore we're sort of diluting your own position. But also, it allows the ANC to hopefully get to a place where it can be safe-ish, even without the DA. So the idea here, I imagine, would be that even if the DA were to leave and they were in a government of national unity with all of the smaller parties, while that will still technically leave them in a government of minority, they'd have a large enough minority where they would be able to get most things done, right? Because they should be able to convince the EFF and the MK to vote on certain things. And so that I think has been the idea. And I think the DA sort of caught on to it. I think the DA sort of figured out that, oh, wait, this is kind of what you guys are up to. In this press briefing by the DA, John Steenhuisen laid out a number of things that they take issue with. The problem with most of these conditions, the ANC will never give the DA any of that. Because a lot of these things that the DA is asking for in this press conference runs directly against the ANC's interests. The DA makes it very clear that Triple BEE has failed. Broad-based black economic empowerment has not worked. If anything, all it has managed to do is destroy the economy of South Africa. Now, to any of the ANC, EFF, and MK supporters that might be watching, I ask you to just very quickly take a look at the following, right? So you have Ramaphosa, for example, celebrating the fact that the gap between white and black is actually narrowing and that they're making black people richer somehow. What he fails to mention is that they're not really making black people that much richer. They're just making Indian and white households poorer, and this is bringing the gap slightly closer. But when you actually convert the earnings of households to dollars, you see that from 2011, we are now more than half worse off. So in 2011, the average household income in South Africa was just under 30,000 US dollars per household. In 2015, that had come down to just over 15,000. And now in 2023, we're well under 15,000. We're close to 10,000. So basically, households have gotten poorer across the board. In fact, when you look at the actual studies into BEE, you find consistently that all that's happened is a small minority of politically connected people, so people who are part of the ANC, friends and family members of ANC members, are the only ones benefiting from BEE. BEE is not benefiting the average man on the street. John Steenhuisen tells the story of letters that they're receiving from actual black entrepreneurs, people who are starting their own businesses, and they don't get contracts. They can't get any government contracts. They can't get any government investment into their business because they're not politically connected. They're not the cousin or the family member of some kind of government official. So the DA calls for a complete scrapping of BEE. Now, of course, what the DA doesn't seem to understand here is the ANC will never scrap BEE and employment equity. And the reason for it is it's what keeps them in power. A lot of people with a lot of influence in this country are still supportive of the ANC, provided that the ANC provides reasonable kickbacks. And if the ANC were ever to stop providing reasonable kickbacks, people like Paul Mashatile will leave, right? People like Gwede Mantashe will leave. They won't stick around. They'll go to other parties and they'll take significant amounts of voting publics with them. Or the worst case scenario for the ANC is Paul Mashatile breaks off and starts his own political party, which will further splinter the ANC. Remember, the ANC is already splintered as a result of the EFF and the MK. Another party will just dilute them even further, which will ultimately lead to the ANC barely being able to get 10% of the vote. So they're desperate to keep everyone together, and the only way to do that is through BEE and employment equity, affirmative action, and all the rest. The DA makes it super clear that they're not against transformation, and we'll get to that in a second, right? But the next thing they say, and we need in this country is energy independence, which I don't think anyone would actually disagree with. They're talking about how harbours and transport rails and stuff needs to be fixed, and I was able to find this incredible study that was done at UCT that actually found that the transport system and the failures of the transport system in South Africa is absolutely decimating the poor in this country. And there's a great reason for it. Moving things is very expensive. It gets cheaper when you can move things with trains, because trains can move hundreds of tons, thousands of tons at the same time. Very expensive to do by truck. About 95% of all goods in this country is moved by truck, not by train, because our trains don't really work. Our harbours is a complete mess, which means that most companies and countries don't really even want to import or export from South Africa because of the state of our harbours. So, if anything, the transport system is just holding South Africa back at this point. They're talking about lowering debt and going after state-owned enterprises as a result of this. Now, I will just say, they also mention stuff about local government and how local government needs to be given more power so that they can actually enact a lot of the reforms that is required. A lot of the things that the DA spoke about here, they speak about the problems, right? And they mention the problems, and they're not wrong about the problems. The issue is they don't provide any solution to the problem, which is what I would want to see from the DA. It's one thing to say, we're going to scrap BEE. Okay, great. What are you proposing in place of it? So for this, I want to very quickly speak to everyone, but more specifically to progressives in this country. If there are any progressives that's watching me, your mind will be that people like myself, conservatives, and perhaps some of you that think in more racial terms, white people, don't want to see black people succeed. We don't want to see black people participate in the economy. We don't want to see black people succeed at anything because we like the fact that they're cheap labor. We like the fact that they don't own homes in our neighborhoods. You couldn't be more wrong. Now, first, let's just purely go on the greed argument. If we are anywhere near as greedy as you think we want all of you to be as rich as possible because then you can buy more stuff from the businesses that we own, right? And more money means more buying power, means more money, right? So on that front, if it was just purely greed, we would want black people to be as rich as possible so that they can buy stuff, right? But let's just go to the human element. Most white people that I speak to every single day want exactly what you want. Trust me when I say that very few of us drive past a township and feel pride, feel good, looking at the suffering and the destitute nature of those townships. None of us pass those townships and think, yeah, well, good for them, right? It breaks my heart every single time I drive past one of those things because it's such an affront in 2025 that people should still live that way. I want to see you be unlocked. I want to see you become politically and economically viable and a member of society that can contribute and stand on your own 2 feet. I want everything that you want. Where you and I differ is in the method. You see, you think that you can take from some, give to others, and somehow get those others to also then become rich. I contend that that's never worked in anywhere in history. When the Russians tried it, all they managed to do is get all of their people dirt poor and dying by the millions of famine, starvation, or just being thrown in prison because they wouldn't be as equally poor as everyone else. When Mao's China tried to do it, they ended up with millions of people dead and starving as a result of communism, because all communism ever manages to do is make everyone equally poor except for the few people at the top who is in charge of everything. It has never worked anywhere. No country has ever gotten rich by taking from one group and giving that to another group. It just doesn't work that way. Instead, what I want to see is an economy where if you want to open a business, you can. If you want to try and do something new, you can. If you want to innovate and invent something, you can. There should be enough energy to do so. Energy should be cheap enough to do so. If you want to get a contract with the government, you should be able to apply like everyone else. And if your offering is good enough, you should get that job. I want you to have the best possible education, and I want to find a way to make sure that that education is funded in the right ways. I understand that there's a number of people in this country that can't afford to send their kids to great schools. I understand that, and I understand we have to find a way around that. But why can't we do tax benefits? Why can't we go to massive companies and corporations and say, hey, if you help fund schools in poor neighborhoods, we'll give you tax benefits where you don't have to pay tax on the money that you're giving to these schools, and actually you can make your own taxes go down if you say give enough money to these schools, thereby funding these schools and ensuring that these schools can actually provide great education. We can do the same thing with mines, and we can do the same thing with all sorts of things. I'm sure if you ask people to pay a little bit more, right, on their own child's school fees, so that they can help, so that their school can help kids that can't afford to go to their schools, a lot of parents would happily give more if it means that more people can get educated, more people can get a sort of head start in this world. But it has to be voluntary. You cannot force people. People don't like being forced. They don't like having stuff taken away from them. And that is the problem. Things like BE, things like EE, things like affirmative action. It's top-down enforcement. And as we've seen time and time again in this country, it doesn't work. The country is getting worse every single year. Look at the inflation rates in this country. Look at the domestic product per capita in this country. We're lower now than what we were in 2011. The country just continues to get worse. And somehow people just continuously think that we just need to continue doing this. Maybe at some point things will get better. Thing is, I hope the DA gets somewhere with this. I don't think they will. Quite frankly, I think this is the DA just realizing that they have a few months left to make an impact, to hopefully get people to vote for them before the ANC will completely make it untenable for them to be part of the GNU anymore. And then they'll have to be able to leave with their heads held high. Sort of my only thinking around this. Let me know in the comment section down below how you guys feel about this, how you feel about the DA's plans, what do you think the DA is up to, how do you feel about fixing the country's problems? What do you think is required to fix the problems in this country? I'd love to read your thoughts in that comment section down below, and it always helps. So hit the like button if you enjoyed this video, the dislike if you didn't. Hit that subscribe button. It's literally just a button, and if I ever do something that you hate, you can just click the button again. You literally lose nothing. Massive shout out to all of the patrons and the YouTube members that help keep this channel going. If you want to become a supporter, click the link in the description down below for Patreon, or just the join button below this video. Any and all support is always very much appreciated. As always, be good to each other, be kind to each other, and I'll see all of you in the next one. Peace.